Congratulations, you did it. 6 weeks of hearing Father Chris, Deacon Bob, and me preach the message series that we call Next Steps. As in next steps for a better you and a better me. You remember that we talked about how we label ourselves as Christians, that as students or followers of Jesus, trying to model ourselves after him. Church people, that's like you and me, we call it discipleship, being a disciple, but simply following Jesus. You know, for many of us over the years, and for many of us that go back a number of decades, we've seen the church evolve over the years. Maybe at a point in time in our lives, we saw that the church can be a little bit naggy, wanting us to do something, volunteer, you got to do this and got to do that, lots of hoops to jump through. Or maybe at some point in our lives, we actually found the church was not asking for anything, just coasting along and being complacent, if you will. But these last 6 weeks, we have attempted to add value to our lives following Jesus Christ. Simple as that. The journey to be a follower, a student, a disciple, we know takes steps. And at times we can go 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards, but we do get there. Quite frankly, the lifestyle choices that will deepen our relationship with Jesus and make our lives more fulfilled. So if you agree to this question, I got to hear a good amen. We all want that, don't we? Would the person who said, yeah, please stand up? I like that. You're an independent thinker. You know, we talked about the introduction about 5 weeks ago, and we had the blanket mass that weekend. But one of the things we try to get across in the Next Step series is that they are not obligations, just simple invitations. Because in any relationship, if we're feeling obligated or nagged or pushed or guilt, it's not very effective. And we've learned that over the years. We also learned, too, that STEPS, as Deacon Bob wanted to make sure, as late as this morning at the 8:30 Mass, that it is he will be so happy to hear, a backronym. Father Chris, he preached on the S, the service in ministry or mission, by giving our time and our talent, focusing on time, talent. For Jesus called himself a servant, and it was his preferred title, and that's what he wants you and me to be as his followers, to give our time, our talent in service to him and to his people. And then Deacon Bob, boy, he had the good one. He talked about the T, tithing, and giving of our treasure. You know, tithing is really an act of worship, just like service of time and talent, treasure. When we give of our treasure, it truly is an act of worship. God is the giver of all our gifts, but we need to learn to love the giver more than the gifts that we've been given, and then learn to use those gifts to worship and to honor him. And then a few weeks ago, I was joined up here with Stacy Zach, a parishioner who heads up our small groups and the development of them, and she gave witness of the importance of small groups while I preached on the E, called engagement with friends in faith, which we are called to live and to talk in small groups. You and I were called to be in relationships with our friends, our family, our spouses, the important people of our lives, but all God's people as well. So how do you make a church of 2,400 families into a small church? Small groups. And back to Deacon Bob early in the series, he talked about the P, the practice of prayer and the celebration of the sacraments. He shared with me a story, a witness that he had yesterday at the 4 o'clock Mass when someone came to him and said, I learned a lot in the practice of prayer from your talk. I learned that I wanted to pray the rosary every day so that my son might return to the church someday. Wouldn't you know it, this week he came to her and said, "Mom, I want to come to Mass with you on Christmas Eve." Think about that for a moment. But today, let's talk about that last S, the final step in next steps. S, share our faith. Well, there's that question, share our faith. It can seem intimidating and often tough because so many of us have been grown to think of our faith as something that's very private between me and God. But Jesus always challenged, even in the Great Commission, to go out and share our faith. Look at the disciples, the apostles today. They're hanging out with Jesus, and they come up with a goofy question, but maybe they just wanted the adulation, the recognition, the star power of being a follower of Jesus. But sharing our faith is what we must do as disciples of Jesus Christ. Listen to the encounter between James and John in Mark's gospel. They come up to Jesus and they say, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And Jesus, so calmly, "Well, what do you wish for me to do for you?" They answered, "Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left." Jesus lets them know that is a costly ask. And of course, the other disciples, when they hear it, they become indignant and angry. You know something? Jesus had inter-group rivalry. That sounds like the world we live in today. The church, our communities, our families, even at work. They didn't get the step of sharing faith at first. And there's maybe a good leadership lesson in all of this for you, for me, that when you see bad feelings develop among those in your group, your organization, your team, your school, your job, your family, your church, don't ignore it and hope it goes away. I imagine, like you and me, that's the way we would prefer it. Nope, we've got to lean into it and address it head on, just like Jesus did. So I want to invite you for a moment now, for those of you who are watching The Chosen on TV. The actor who portrays Jesus does such a beautiful job of expressing what we heard in part of the gospel today, that basically in God's estimation, the one who serves most is the greatest. The one who is counted first and of all will be the servant of all. So let's hear what he has to say.
Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Because even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.
What he said, rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be a servant, and whoever wishes to be the first among you will be the slave of all. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for the many. He goes on to inform the disciples that it would be him who pays the price for our sins. So let's take a look at our story. Let's be honest as we reflect on this, because this is who I am, and I would imagine most of you can relate to this. We've all let him down. We've been ungrateful for his gifts. And there were events, seasons, decisions in which you and I have turned our back on God over and over and over again. And in fact, our sin can be so persistent. I know in my life that it can be enslaving. It's a debt that I can't pay. That was paid for me by Jesus Christ on the cross. And if you take a look at the cross behind me, you see his arms opened as if to embrace us. That's the amount of love that he has for us. He paid the ransom, the debt for you, for me, out of love. We don't deserve it. We can't earn it. We can't even work our way out of it or pay it off. There's only one way. Share it. Share our faith. Now the question again, share it? Absolutely. Look at what he did and does for us. Isn't that good news to share? The gospel, the word gospel means good news. And that is what we are to do. Share the good news. Share the faith. You remember in the very first week when we heard about the intro to this series, and we talked about step by step, and we saw a little baby starting to walk, step by step, finally running to a happy parent, although on this occasion we see the parent taking the baby along. But eventually that baby would run into the parent's arms, running in. What do? We take pictures, we share videos, we go and call our family. Good news. Great to see what's happening. But so many more ways that happen. We see that maybe a good grade in school, a proud child sharing what they are. I asked a young man today at the 8:30 Mass, I said, how you doing in school? And he said, I got all hundreds. Good news. I asked someone else and they said, okay. Well, that's good news too. How about an engagement? There was a young man sitting in the front row who just announced his engagement. How wonderful is that for good news? And maybe the dream job. I got exactly what I want, so I can feel fulfilled. You know, we can't keep good news secret. We got to share it. So maybe what's a good strategy to share our faith, to share the good news? Not as a nag, not as an obligation, but as a welcoming and inviting experience. 2 eyes. Not my eyes I'm talking about, the letter I. An I and an I. And the first is invest. We invest in people we love all the time. We invest in our family, we invest in our friends, we invest in our neighbors. We take the time to go and find out what's going on. We want to make a difference. Adult children, they invest in their elderly parents so that they have the sunset years with a spirit of dignity. Why do we do that? We want rewards from it. And you know what the reward is? It's the hope is that they will have a better life. Our children, our parents, people in our lives. But the next I is in tandem to that first. Invite, invest, invite. During this message series, there was a parishioner who invited a friend to join them at Mass. They came to the 4 o'clock Mass a few weeks ago when Father Chris was preaching and I was presiding at that Mass. The person happened to be just kind of bouncing around from church to church, trying to kind of get grounded in a faith community. Well, she and her friend, the two people, they invested their time together. They talked, they shared faith. And guess what? At some point, our parishioner took the invest to the next level, invite. After that Mass, this visitor left us a note. And on that note was a beautiful message to you and to all of us here at the Catholic community. She said, I have been a Catholic my entire life. When I left the 4 o'clock Mass on September 28th, I felt so engaged and inspired to take my faith to the next level. I felt so blessed that my friend asked me to join her for the Mass. You see, it shows that we can share the good news with a strategy of invest and invite. We're all doing it in our lives, and so let's consider doing it for Jesus and the Church of Jesus Christ. That's us. Share your faith can appear, as I said earlier, tough and maybe intimidating, but it can also be as simple as that invitation to join at this community celebration. It is following the Lord step by step in the direction of becoming disciples. As we said all along, a little bit more today than yesterday, a little bit more tomorrow than today, and in the process, we will be rewarded with a more fulfilling life here now, but in the ages to come. What a gift that is. So questioning ourselves, are you serving in a parish ministry, liturgy, religious education, whatever it might be? Are you involved in a small group or want to be? Are you feeding the hungry through our Vincent de Paul Society? Then take the next step. Share the good news. Share your faith. And this week, I leave you and we conclude this message with two questions as we look at share, tithe, engage, practice prayer, share the faith. Ask ourselves this question: with whom will I invest time? And finally, who will I invite? Let's go and make a difference, one step at a time. God bless you.